scared of losing.
Hello there.
This is where the fun begins.
Hey there guys, Unofficial Star Wars here, hope you're all doing well, and in this video we're going to be breaking down Andor Episode 1 with things that you have missed, Easter eggs, and our own theories and speculations towards the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. Clearly there are spoilers ahead, let's go ahead and jump right on into it. The overall episode starts off with a very Blade Runner type of feel to it, is what a lot of people I have seen describe to it, and I couldn't agree anymore. Our main character, Cassian Andor, is on a rainy type of watery type of planet. It's not necessarily Kamino from Attack of the Clones or Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but I just love everything about this overall scene of him walking to this strip club like bar thing that he's going to. It just looks really cool and menacing walking over to it, just this whole scene. We of course are later to learn that Cassian Andor is on the hunt, or at least on the look, for his younger sister. Now we see his sister in flashbacks that we're going to see throughout this episode. I'd like to also quickly point out that the cinematography is absolutely visually stunning for this overall show. I just love everything about that as well. In this whole bar thing, in this whole scene, he's asking around with some of the people that work there if they know anything about his sister that used to work there. To which, of course, she replies that she would have no idea because nobody uses their real name. And this is something that is kind of a common theme, especially during this time period in the Star Wars universe. These two Imperial officers sitting across the bar are kind of just giving him weird, funny looks and just being rude overall. They were upset over the fact that the lady that works there went to go talk to Cassian Andor before she went to go talk to them. And after not finding much information on his younger sister, he leaves, although these two Imperials follow him outside. They're referred to as Corporos, as kind of later learned throughout episodes, which could be the same terminology as to describe an Imperial as an imp. It's kind of like a slang type of term, I guess, and is also supposed to be offensive towards Imperials. Well, it also seems like these guys kind of chose the wrong day to mess around with the one and only Cassian Andor, because he's simply just not having it after these guys try to pat him down for 300 credits, essentially robbing him at that. We see Cassian bust a move on these two dudes, hitting the one in the head, seemingly killing him, as we later learn. The other officer begs for forgiveness and asks Andor to just come with him where they can turn both of them each other in. But I'd also like to point out the fact that Andor is shocked at the fact that himself, he was just straight up killed this dude. He didn't mean to necessarily, it was a complete accident at the same time as well. And to be honest, I'm not completely sure if this would be considerably Andor's first kind of kill in his Star Wars run here, or if he has killed other people before in the past, before the Andor show, so it's kind of up in the air. Anyway, he's not going with this other officer dude and turning himself in, because why would he want to do that? So he just shoots this guy too. From there we find the droid B, as he's referred to in the show, and he is a little rover type of droid. He talks and everything, he does it all, and he's very cool. This opening scene with him was quite funny as well, as these Star Wars space dogs, hounds, come running out and one pees on him. The little droid makes his way over to Andor on this kind of home planet of Andor's, for right now anyway, by which I should also mention we're dealing with all new planets in this overall show aside from Coruscant, so it's exciting, but I'm still kind of learning the names and kind of the history of these overall Star Wars planets, although there isn't all that much history about them because they're canonically completely new. When the little droid B reaches Andor, we see him in a sleeping sequence of where we have flashbacks, more of his previous life, of where he was born and raised. And really this overall kind of flashback sequences of Andor's earlier child life really reminds me of Peter Pan and the Boys That Never Grew Up. I'm not completely sure the terminology or what their names were, but I think you guys get the idea. I think it was called Neverland. And this is from the fact that they're all kids. There's no grown-ups, there's no adults anywhere or anything like that, so I'm very curious onto as of where the adults would be. These kids see a Imperial spaceship crashing out of the sky, so it kind of sets up a subplot for this overall episode and the next couple of episodes as well, episode 2 and 3. We cut back to Andor, who's now awake and talking to the little red droid B and telling him to just make up the story of where he was last night, trying to covering up his tracks of what happened last night. I mean, he just killed these 2 Imperials and is kind of on the run with things now. And it is from there where we see Andor make his way into town to talk up with one of his best friends who seems to be working as a mining facility engineer or something like that. Whereby which, in simple terms, Andor tells him that he got into a sticky situation last night. Then again, as I had mentioned previously before, I'm curious as to wondering if this is the first kind of quote-unquote kill or murder that Andor has had in his Star Wars, I guess, life, canonically. Because all things considered, he's very calm and collective over the entire situation and almost seemingly knows what to do. He makes up this story with one of his best friends that they were out together last night if any questions come up regarding anything from anyone, Imperials or anyone else. And so, being the best friend, he simply agrees to it with no questions asked. And on top of that, speaking of Imperial trouble, we get a glimpse of our Imperial characters. This Imperial officer's name is Syril, and seeing from our first impressions of this guy, he's very serious about his overall job of being an Imperial officer. And in the scene, he's telling his boss about this whole thing with Andor killing these 2 other Imperials, and the overall sense of urgency that he has with this whole, I guess, situation going on, and by which Syril's boss responds with making up some type of story, so this isn't really all that much of a big deal. This exactly parallels of exactly what we just saw with Andor and his best friend, making up some type of story, so this doesn't seem like a big deal or that there's any involvement with it at all. From there, this is where Andor begins to make his grand escape, where he goes and meets with one of his best friends named Bix. Previously before, as have mentioned in previous kind of news updates and insights that we've had here on the channel, is that Andor and Bix used to be kind of a thing, well, a couple, boyfriend and girlfriend. And just much like the fictional universe of Star Wars, well, somehow after their entire breakup, it seems of two that the two have remained friends. Even so, while Bix is now dating, well, this guy, his name is Tim. Andor is here meeting with Bix in an effort to get her to contact one of the buyers or dealers that Bix used to work with. This is so Andor can sell the ship that he stole from the 2 Imperials seemingly at the beginning of the episode. This is exactly kind of what I'm gathering from it, is that this ship that Andor is trying to sell to Luthen, who we later meet in episode 2 and episode 3, is trying to sell with this ship to, and I think that this used to be an Imperial ship that belonged to the 2 Imperials that he had killed at the beginning of this episode. And even more so, to clear up any other confusion, it's not necessarily the ship itself, it's what's inside the ship, which is some type of Imperial tracking device that Luthen wants. This is so that Luthen can go ahead and track down other Imperial ships in an effort to sabotage them, as this would be the beginning of the rebellion. Anyway, after Andor is finished talking with Bix and kind of convincing her about this whole idea, he shares an awkward moment with Tim, who's Bix's new boyfriend. It's awkward, it's human emotion, and it's kind of humanizing the Star Wars canon galaxy. We then go into another flashback sequence of Andor's earlier days and his childhood, and after this Imperial ship had crashed down onto their planet near their tribal site, they begin to go ahead and get ready to go investigate it. They put on, you know, face paints and that type of stuff and get their weapons all ready. They have spears and that type of stuff as well. And aside from that, I think the coolest thing, my most favorite part about this whole tribal storytelling thing with these flashbacks is that it's all visual storytelling. They don't give us any subtitles to as of what they're saying in their own language. And from there, we cut back to Syril, who has a little bit of a lead of what might have gone on here with the murder of these 2 Imperials that Andor had done in at the beginning of the episode, as he's able to see what ship had kind of gone through one of the checkpoints without having any type of identification check. I'm not exactly sure on how Andor might have got, I guess, around this whole thing, aside from the idea that maybe he was using an Imperial ship. Aside from that, I'm not completely sure. From there, once again, introducing new characters and really overall world building, we're kind of getting a Han Solo feel for Andor at this point in time, as this guy right here seems to be almost like a friend of Andor, wants his money back, as he had loaned it, I guess, to Andor, and is kind of just trying to intimidate it and kind of see where his money's at. From there, we see Bix go off to try and contact Luthen. Now, she has to do this from a special kind of solar tower, so she has to go into town a little bit, and she tells her boyfriend Tim that she's going off, and by which he tries to follow her because he has his own theories and speculations that maybe her and Andor could still potentially be a thing still. Anyway, he kind of loses track of her, and she kind of goes on her merry way. She's just legitimately trying to contact Luthen, and she cares for Tim. They're not, you know, there's no, I guess, affair going on here between Bix or Andor. We see Cyril then again setting up some more tactics here in an effort to catch Cassian Andor because it's that much of a big deal. Now, remember then again that there isn't any other kind of rebellion. There's nothing else good for the Imperials to really be doing at this point in time. So this is why this is such a big deal. During this point in time, during the Star Wars timeline, these types of things just don't necessarily happen, and where you have the murder of 2 Imperial officers. It is from here is where I believe that Andor is getting this little Imperial, I guess, tracking ID box that he wants to sell to Luthen, and I'm still not completely 110% sure, and I don't think I'll ever be, on if this is an Imperial ship that belonged to the 2 Imperial officers that he murdered at the beginning of the episode, so maybe let me know down in the comment section down below. From there, we go off into another flashback sequence of where Andor is now leaving his sister behind to go and investigate the crash site of this Imperial ship. And as we later learn in the rest of these episodes, unfortunately, this would be the last time that Andor and his sister would see each other, which is really quite sad to, well, think about, and kind of telling from the Rogue One movie. If the two are to reunite within the show somewhere, I'd still believe that the sister would either, for one, bite the dust and I guess die, or that she would still go off and maybe live a good life in the Star Wars universe. I mean, at least during this time period. And from there, that is where episode 1 of Andor actually concludes. That there is kind of the full analysis, so to speak. Now, I wanted to take a quick look here at this kind of shipyard right here that we see for a quick moment throughout this episode. We get a quick glimpse at it all, and I honestly, there's no ships in here that I recognize, like, right off the bat. The only ship that looks somewhat familiar would be the one that is closest to the screen. Looks like one of these snow speeders used in The Empire Strikes Back. There's that, and the ship in the far back kind of has the same cockpit as we see with the Millennium Falcon. I don't know though, maybe that could just kind of be a stretch. That's just kind of what I'm seeing. Aside from that, all these ships literally look like new and unique and different. The episode begins with another flashback type of video, this time of this tribe that Cassian is a part of and his younger childhood, as we had discussed and talked about in our previous breakdown video here on the channel, as they're making their way to a crash site of an Imperial ship that had crashed. We also get to explore a little bit more of this planet here as Cassian stops and looks at what appears to be a mining field set up by the Empire. I'm a little bit curious to learn a little bit more about this whole mining facility thing that they had going on, although there probably isn't a lot to go with it, so to speak, and it's, I don't know, probably just not there anymore. I also just have to say, I love what they've been doing with these whole flashback type of scenes throughout these episodes here as well. I think that they just line up so very well, and I also want to give a huge shout out to the Book of Boba Fett for kind of like introducing flashbacks more into like the whole thing with Star Wars and everything like that, because that there, I think, and I believe, is really where we first began to see like heavy flashbacks, especially with Star Wars. Another thing I've absolutely been loving about the overall Andor show is the way that we're not getting any like time gaps or anything like that. We leave directly off of from where we left off with episode 1, as the city is now kind of closing down, or this little village type of thing is closing down and going to sleep, as this guy is like ringing the bells and everything like that. Everybody's kind of shutting down shop and well, heading back to their homesteads. The scene is really important right here, as we see Bix is looking at her computer. She's receiving a new transmission from the Empire, and this of course is like a wanted type of poster for Andor, because he's now wanted from the Empire. However, she leaves a little bit of a mistake by leaving this whole thing up on the computer screen for her boyfriend Tim to see. And as we later learn throughout this episode, is that he is the one that kind of rats out Cassian on where he is. From there, we see Cassian finally return to his real home on this planet here, and this is kind of like his mom right here. They're not technically biologically, you know, his mom or anything like that, but from what we see in the flashbacks, she's the one that takes him in. And as I had mentioned in our episode 1 breakdown, I'm really curious on where on earth all the adults and parents are in those flashbacks, because it just seems to be a tribe of kids. However, Andor unfortunately has to kind of break the news to his mom that he's like wanted from the Empire, and that he's just kind of fleeing from the planet now. He's getting out of there. Although he doesn't necessarily completely put it in those terms that, hey mom, I'm wanted from the Empire, I'm on the run right now. Although as we kind of see in episode 3, she probably kind of figures that's kind of the case of what's going on there. And Cassian simply just tells her that he has to get off world for right now. I mean, honestly, her facial expressions say it all to me. From there, we see Andor go ahead and meet up with Bix in some type of Star Wars cantina styled bar. I mean, there's always some type of cantina or bar in Star Wars. It's also kind of from right here is where Andor is kind of saying like, hey, I'm out of here, I'm getting off world, I'm kind of wanted for right now. And he's also kind of seeking a little bit of an update for his buyer on where on earth his buyer is that's going to be the one that gives him the credits. And we see his buyer later on in this episode, who is Luthen. Importantly enough as well, it's right here in this episode where Bix is able to spot her boyfriend Tim from across the bar, seeing that he's a little bit tipsy, a little bit drunk, and not completely with it. He also doesn't like the entire fact that Andor still hangs around with Bix, seeing, as I had mentioned in the previous episode breakdown, Bix and Andor kind of used to be a thing, well, boyfriend and girlfriend, which just like much of the entirety of Star Wars is kind of unrealistic. Well, this is too. Jokes aside, Tim doesn't like this, not one bit, and decides to go ahead and report Andor to the Empire. Remembering back a couple of scenes earlier on in this episode, how Bix accidentally left the information about Andor up on her computer and Tim read about it, so he knows about that this is Andor that the Empire is looking for. And kind of like the chum that Tim is, he goes ahead and he submits the photograph and everything about Andor that he knows to the Empire because he's, well, kind of out of it. He's tipsy and he's drunk about it and doesn't like the fact that Andor is hanging around with his girlfriend. It's from here where things kind of get a little bit, I guess, more adult toned in theme here. There's something that's been teased about the overall Andor show, like for the last couple of months, is that this show is going to incorporate some of those tones and themes that are more meant for adults, and we kind of get one of those many kissy scenes in Star Wars, although this one I will say is a little bit more, I think, added, a little bit more intimate. Of course, it's between Tim and his girlfriend Bix, and I don't know, I don't know anything about that. I mean, I'm a Star Wars fan, so I don't know anything about that. Anyway, moving forward, we get introduced to a new Imperial officer who's kind of on the same, I guess, bar, so to speak, with Cyril when it comes to following the duties of what the Empire is meant for, especially somebody that is so intrigued and engrossed with finding the murderer of these two Imperials from episode 1 and at the beginning. Anyway, these two chums kind of discuss about, oh yeah, Empire, let's go get him type of thing, so yeah. The scene of Cassian kind of digging around in his little, so to speak, hideout, abandoned ship, I guess, on his home planet is important because now we're truly getting revealed of what Cassian plans to sell to the buyer that Bix has sent, and that is Luthen. He's coming here to this planet to meet with Andor. And so, as I had mentioned in our first episode breakdown, it's this little like Imperial tracker box where you're able to kind of find different Imperial outposts and ships and that type of stuff. It's something that's highly valuable to Luthen, who's kind of the, I guess, godfather of the rebellion, so to speak. And also seeing that it's kind of like nighttime as of right now, we go into another type of flashback type of thing because, well, I guess Andor's supposed to be sleeping right now, so see how that kind of lines up. Sort of as if it's like a dream, much like we saw within the Book of Boba Fett, that every time Boba was in the Bacta tank and like kind of sleeping, it was like a flashback type of scene. So the tribe has now kind of snuck up on this Imperial crash site here and are kind of investigating it, see if there's any survivors that they might need to take care of and get rid of, or actually help them because they would be nice. Well, in this case, they're not completely nice, and if for anything, it seems as if so that they've been infected with some type of virus. Now I'm gonna have a different, like, separate video here on the channel talking about this as a Star Wars theory. I believe that this would be the Blackwing virus. It's something that's part of Legends, I also believe. You guys will see about that more in just a moment. This poor girl right here, who seems to be kind of like the leader of this whole tribe, is the one that kind of goes in and is investigating everything. She pokes at the first dead kind of body, so to speak. Well, we think it's dead at least, and kind of carries on from there, and then this dead body like just rises up and like goes berserk, accidentally shooting her in the back, and it's shooting off into the forest. And I swear I thought it might have hit some of the other tribal members that had been out there in the tree line. I guess not, because nothing was said about any of them. Nobody really seemed as sad of it, I guess, also, so to speak, and everybody kind of hurried over to this girl. However, before we go back to the flashbacks, we go into the morning here, so to speak, now in like the present time of when this show is taking place, as we see Luthen making his way to the planet to meet with Andor, and he has to land a couple, I guess, a little bit away from, I guess, where everything is, so he can lay low here from the rest of the Imperials or anything else kind of suspicious going on. And just like how this guy kind of put everybody to bed and closed the entire village down, he's kind of waking everybody back up again. He's like the roaster, I guess, or the rooster, so to speak, of a farm, waking everybody up. He's an alarm clock. This scene right here, we see Andor make a grave mistake by giving his little droid, this red droid named B, a comm or walkie-talkie essentially, so he's able to talk with him as Andor is making his run here to go meet with Luthen. It's not the best idea because this is the exact way that the Imperials, well, spoiler alert, find out where Andor is in the 3rd episode. We then see Andor's mom type of figure, his mom, I guess I'll just call her, walk into his room and see that he's not there. Boo-hoo, she's kind of sad about it, he's gone now. I have a good feeling that they're going to reunite, you know, sometime in the future of this overall show, whether it be by the end of season 1 or in season 2. I'm not completely sure. I would like to quickly mention that the actress that's playing this character, her name is Marva. I'm not going to completely just call her Andor's mom for the entirety of this video. Fiona Shaw is the lady that plays this, I guess, woman right here, this character here, and she does a phenomenal acting job. That goes for everybody in this show. I mean, the acting is top tier throughout this entirety of the show. I love it. It is from here where we go back to those flashback scenes. Remember I was talking about those like just a couple of minutes ago? This here is where this poor girl's about to like meet her end, as this one dude that she goes past, this, so to speak, dead body wakes up and kind of goes berserk. He sees all these other like people around him. He's just kind of like starts shooting aimlessly. He ends up hitting the poor leader girl, and well, she kicks the bucket, and from there they all dart this guy to death until he just like is totally finished off. I mean, it kind of does bring in some of those grittier tones and themes with Andor, but I feel like this isn't anything different compared to the Return of the Jedi with the whole Ewoks and everything like that. I'm also overly disappointed that like nobody decided to say anything. They all just watched from the tree line as this dude was waking up and starting to like go berserk and then accidentally shoot the leader of this tribal group. I mean, it's honestly really depressing. They should have done something, I guess. But I'd also like to once again kind of point out the green, I guess, features on all these guys here, like a Blackwing type of virus, as I had mentioned previously before. I'll be talking about this in a separate future video here on the channel as a Star Wars series, so hit the subscribe button and notification bell to be, I guess, notified for that. Also, honestly, RIP this poor girl. I mean, they all seem like so sad about it. Honestly, A tier acting job right here as well, as I had just mentioned. Oh yeah, and it's also right here where we kind of see Cassian like really lose his stuff right here. He starts kind of really freaking out, and as everybody's carrying away her poor dead body, he stops and looks back at this like Imperial facility, or like crashed Imperial ship rather. And as we see in the third episode, he decides to go in it and just like start tearing it apart and like rampaging and everything like that. That there's up until we see his mother type of figure, Marva, come and I guess rescue him to an extent, because there are other Imperials coming down to this crash site here to kind of clean it up and everything like that. Then again, going back into the, I guess, current timeline of when this show is taking place, we see Andor meet with one of his chums. This guy works at like a, I guess, like train station almost type of thing, or a shuttle type of facility of where different shuttles are going on and off of the world. And Cassian is asking about like when's the soonest he can get out of here and all that type of stuff there as well. Keep the engine hot type of thing. This is also a reference to something that he says in the Rogue One movie. Shout out to whoever, I guess, posted this on Instagram, or maybe I saw it on Twitter. I'm not completely sure. From there, we go to probably one of the most awkward Imperial scenes of all of Star Wars. We go to the crew with Cyril, and they're all on their way to this planet of where Andor is. It's kind of like this huge climatic moment that we see in the third episode. Anyway, Cyril, the one officer, and then the other like Chumley type of looking officer are the ones that are giving like these like inspirational type of speeches to these other crewmates. They're all called corporos is what they're referred to as in the show, but they're really just Imperials. And Cyril just isn't the best, I guess, with giving those types of inspirational types of speeches. It's the most awkward thing ever. Everybody's just like looking this dude down. I almost feel bad for him to like a certain extent, but this dude's like an a-hole in the third episode, I guess, as we kind of further on see. I also love the parallelism of this scene, the shot right here where he's standing in front of everybody, and then goes to this scene of where he's standing in front of nobody. And I think it's kind of like leading towards this whole like redemption arc for this guy here as well. It's something I kind of poked a little bit at in I think the first episode breakdown video here on the channel, so I'll be talking about this in a future separate video here on the channel as well, going a little bit more in depth with that and everything I think that's going to go on with that. From there, we have an awkward scene then with Luthen as he's riding like a public transport type of thing. It's like a public bus, so to speak, of where he meets this like weird dude that starts talking to him. And like something else we kind of learn regarding like world building and character developing here with this whole timeline of where we are at in the Star Wars universe. Nobody likes the Empire, especially nobody on this planet, is something that we more heavily see in the third episode as well. Like they have like a whole plan that they have going there for themselves if the, I guess, Imperials ever come to their planet, which is very cool. And just kind of like the whole point of this scene, aside to be kind of like a little bit comedic at the same time, it's also kind of just world building and character developing as well, but also importantly like humanizing Star Wars characters. Like these are just normal everyday people, and they run into these awkward situations of where they might have to ride some type of public transport, and then they run into like some weirdo type of thing. Although I will say props to this dude, like he's just a nice dude, I guess, overall. He's not like entirely completely weird, but you guys get the point. It is from there where the episode finally concludes with this total badass looking like scene right here of Andor just walking through like the scrapyard and just looking cool and menacing and everything, all of the above. I just love it. He looks really cool, and he's off to wherever he's going to go meet Luthen, this little like warehouse type of thing that we see in the third episode, I think, if I remember correctly. But two things right off the bat that I just have to get off my chest and just have to mention. I just have to say it. I love how everything that we saw in the last two episodes, the two first episodes of this show, have kind of anticipated and built up into the third episode, because the third episode is just go, go, go. It's all action, and I absolutely am in love with it. It's totally just like going on. It keeps you at the edge of your seat. You just don't know exactly what's going on or what's going to happen. That being said, I am more than happy that they kind of did the show this way with a 3-episode premiere. Now, this is also something that's kind of following underneath the whole like arc idea that they have going on. This is something else I've been talking about here on the channel kind of off and on, up in the air. Something that they're going to be doing for both season 1 and season 2 with this show is that they're going to follow the kind of Star Wars or Clone Wars animated show there with the different arcs of the episodes, where 3 episodes is going to equal kind of like one storyline type of thing. So that there is why episodes 1 through 3, for one thing, were all released together, and for another other thing, they all just line up beautifully together. And for another thing, I love how just once again the episodes are leaving off from one another, where there's not a lot of time in between, or like little to no gap, is something that's so cool. It better connects you with the entirety of the universe and the world, and also with your characters as well. It's something I hope that Star Wars does a little bit more of in the future. I love it. Anyway, that being all said, of course, clearly the episode 3 starts off from where we left off, kind of here with the different flashbacks that we've had here with Andor in his earlier days, where he's on his home planet, his home world, and he's living with a little bit of like a tribal type of group, but they're all kids, which is kind of weird. I've mentioned this throughout the last 2 videos. And it is from here where him and his tribal group have gone to explore an Imperial crash site that had recently just crashed near their kind of tribe camp. And so during the overall investigation, it kind of goes wrong. One of those like guys, the Imperial guys, wakes up and goes berserk, accidentally shooting the leader. Well, he kind of does it on purpose because he's like crazy and totally on a rampage. I mean, there's just like no denying that, of course, and it's honestly kind of sad and pretty depressing. Anyway, Andor stays behind at this crash site because he wants to explore it just a little bit more and really stand up for his entirety of his tribal group as well. He feels it almost as a little bit of a duty, but at the same time, you can kind of see something that's like sparked inside of him, and that he's feeling this anger. Something that kind of almost directly like parallels into what we see with adult grown-up Andor as well, that we're seeing now during this actual show and when it's taking place. And once again, as I had mentioned previously in our last breakdown video, these dudes are all like green around the gills type of thing. They don't look so good, and I have a theory about this I want to talk about in a separate future video here on the channel, so hit the subscribe button and stay on the lookout for that by hitting the notification bell. It is from here, after this entirety of this little flashback scene here, we're going to get back to it in just a moment throughout this episode here as well. We're in the current day of when this show is taking place. Andor's kind of saying his final goodbyes here, and now he's visiting one of his friends that works at the kind of like scrapyard mining facility type of area. There's nothing too deep about it, to be honest. It's just simply humanizing your characters, and he's just kind of saying, hey, thanks for it, and I'll see you later type of thing. From there, we have the buyer that is wanting to meet with Andor, that Andor had asked his friend Bix to call in. He is now landing on the planet and is here to visit with Andor, and Andor is going to sell him an Imperial tracking device, as what it seems like. And so that's way Luthen, who's so to speak the godfather, or really the overall, yeah, I guess godfather is the way to put it, I guess creator, or yeah, founding father, so to speak, of the rebellion, is here to buy, and this will allow him to track various Imperial ships and that type of stuff as well, helping him give an upper hand on the entirety of the Empire. Then again, also remember that the rebellion isn't all that much of a thing right now, and he's still kind of currently working on it. Hence the entirety purpose of, well, the show. He quickly also meets up with Bix, the one that calls him in, and she tells him kind of like where to go and what's going on type of thing. From there, this is kind of where the episode really begins to pick up. As I had mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is a fast-paced type of episode. It keeps you on your toes, keeps you at the edge of your seat the entire time. You don't know exactly what's going to happen and what's going on here, especially when you're dealing with all new characters in the Star Wars universe. Well, aside from Cassian Andor, you just don't know what's going on. Like, you don't know like what's going to happen to who. Like, nobody has plot armor, so to speak. Also, this entire scene of, well, all these corpos, as they're called in the show, but really the Imperials, are all aboard this gunship, really reminds me of the First Order from The Force Awakens when they're landing on the planet of Jakku at the beginning of the movie, and there's like the lights flashing and everything like that. We then go into some more flashbacks, and this here is where Andor's like mother type of figure, her name is Marva, meets Andor on the Imperial crash site. They're kind of investigating it and taking a look at it. They're kind of like the beginning of, I guess, like the rebellion in a sense, but we kind of don't know enough to like say that completely. They're really more just like scrappers or scavengers, kind of, I guess, stripping the ship of any goods it might have. And so as we see in this process, they meet up with Andor, and as we later see on throughout this episode, she kind of takes him and gets him out of there because there's other Imperials that are coming to this crash site to really truly clean it up and, I guess, get it out of there. And boom, just like that, we're back in like the forefront of where the show is taking place. I mean, as I had mentioned, notice how fast-paced this episode is overall going. From here, we have the Corpos, or the Imperials, rather, are going to be landing on the, I guess, planet here now to get a hold of Andor. This is who they're after, and in the last episode breakdown video, an episode overall, Bix's boyfriend named Tim is the one that kind of ratted out Andor. On top of that, also notice the way that this like gunship design also lands like an Imperial shuttle, the white shuttles that we see from the original trilogy, which is really cool. Anyway, these Corpos come stomping onto this planet, acting like they own the place, like any other Imperial that you probably have seen in Star Wars, and like everybody around them is getting those funny looks and everything like that. And as I had mentioned in our previous video, these like little village and town has like their plan set of what happens in a case like this. Like, they all kind of go berserk, as you guys are going to see later on in this episode, and they start banging on stuff, and they shut down all their stores and shops and everything like that, and kind of go into like a full lockdown type of thing for one thing, and for another thing, they start banging on walls and that type of stuff in an effort to kind of like intimidate and scare away these Corpos and Imperials, because this is almost like a founding place of the early beginnings of the rebellions. Something else that I have kind of mentioned in previous update videos and insight videos and that type of stuff here regarding the Andor show is the way that the rebellion is kind of being explored and set up overall in this show, and then again throughout the entirety of Star Wars canon, especially during this timeline, or at least time during the Star Wars timeline at that, is that there are kind of like different pockets, so to speak, of the rebellion. They're all like over and scattered around the place, and none of them really know of each other all that much, and this I don't really think is all that much of a thing until we see Saw Gerrera, who we've seen in the trailers for the Andor show, meet up with Luthen, something we'll probably see in a future episode here. But then again, keeping it with the fast pace of this overall episode, as I had mentioned before, we go and see Andor. What is he doing right now? He's like in this little hideout type of area, like a secret little spot of where he's planning to meet Luthen, and that's like it. And just like that, we're switching gears once again, going into some more of those flashbacks where we have Marva on board this Imperial crash site, and they're kind of like talking about back and forth, like what to do with Andor or Cassian, and like should we take him, should we leave him type of thing. Something I kind of forgot to mention at the beginning of this video is the way that like this entire like flashback sequences are kind of like paralleling directly of what's going on currently, at least where the Andor show is supposed to be taking place 5 years before the events of the Rogue One movie, with having like the Imperials coming down onto the planet and they're in search of Andor, and they're doing the same thing well in the flashbacks. Well, not necessarily looking for Andor specifically, but they're coming to the crash site, and like they're like approaching, like they're getting close, and you don't want them to find you type of thing. From there we have the Imperials go to Marva's home / Andor's home, and they have like a warrant and everything like that. I don't really think they exist necessarily in the Star Wars universe. Like the Imperials are like straight up evil, especially in this episode we really see like how bad these dudes really are. And something that we've had talked about here for the Andor show is that we're going to see both sides. We're going to see how bad the Empire really gets, and we're going to see how bad the rebellion's really going to get. And that's like a huge thing, is like how bad is the rebellion really going to get? How dirty are they really going to get? Now I would technically count what Andor did in the first episode of the overall show, killing the 2 Imperial officers, and I can't defend it. I mean, he did it out of good reason. Like they were like messing with him, and like they were in the wrong type of thing. Like you just can't defend that. And even then again, Andor doesn't know what the rebellion is even. Like he wasn't a part of it or anything. That's just Andor being Andor type of thing. Anyway, as we see these Imperials like totally tear apart the house and everything like that, they're just like, they're not even like looking like, where do you think he is? You think he's underneath like a pillow or something? Like they're just tearing apart the house, like looking for maybe like any tidbit of evidence. It's right here where, as I mentioned in our previous breakdown video, of where Andor makes his mistake. He gives a comlink to his B droid, and on top of that he starts talking through the comlink like at the worst case scenario, like the worst part possible of where like they're right in front of the droid and they can hear him clearly like coming through and everything like that, and they are able to track down the comlink, and well, Andor's toast from there kind of. That is, if Luthen has anything to say about it. They really team up together, and there's a lot of back and forth chatter in this whole sequence here of what Luthen and Andor have to say to each other. Like there's a lot of trust issues going on and everything like that. They're also kind of negotiating and everything like that, as I have previously mentioned in those breakdown videos, and also reiterate right here again about how Andor is trying to sell these Imperial box, or like transmission box or tracker box. It's an Imperial though, to Luthen. Luthen's like the godfather, of course, like of the rebellion and everything like that, and this is in an effort to help Luthen track down other Imperial ships and kind of get the upper hand on the entirety of the Imperials and the Empire. And at the same time, as I have previously mentioned before, we see the entire like village and town starting to like go crazy. They're shutting down all their shops and they're banging on walls and everything like that. They're prepared for this type of thing. Like they've trained for this type of thing, it seems like, almost. And as Marva mentions, it's like it's a reckoning. I mean, it's all in an effort to like intimidate and scare away the Imperials and everything like that. And it really does. Like it sent like shivers down my spine, where she's giving like the entire monologue about like how like it's when they stop doing it is when you should get scared. And that's when things got messy with Luthen and Andor, and they really are making a run for it and breaking out. It's also right here is where this one dude, I don't even know their names, but he's like really nice, and they come and talk to Bix about how the Imperials are here and they're here for Andor. And it's also here where Tim overhears this whole conversation, and Bix figures that, well, Tim's the one that like ratted out Andor. I mean, who else would have done it? And Tim is totally guilty over it. I almost feel bad for him too as well. Like we later see in this episode, of course, that like he gets shot and he dies and everything like that. But then again, I do have to reiterate, as a Star Wars fan, I have to come up with those crazy like predictions and theories. It's Star Wars, is anybody ever really dead type of thing. Still keeping up with this entire fast-paced thing throughout this episode, we go back to Luthen and Andor. They're discussing about the box and everything like that. It's self-explanatory. However, the tensions are high about, you know, this entire thing with the Imperials being here and everything like that. They're starting to catch on, and they're getting closer and closer to Andor and Luthen. They have to, you know, figure things out. They have to trust each other, and they have to get out of there. Spoiler alert, that's exactly what happens. I will say my only query with not only this episode, but the entirety of this show so far is this scene right here, is where this Imperial officer or guard tells Bix to stop running. I mean, why her out of everybody? Like, everybody around you is running running around like crazy and like just banging on walls and all this stuff as well. So why single out Bix? It just doesn't make sense to me. It feels totally random and just like I don't know. It just feels weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's totally random and just out of pocket. That there's literally my only complaint, as I had said, not only about this episode but the entirety of this show. The show has been absolutely phenomenal, story concept telling wise and filmmaking wise. I love the way that they did this show and everything like that. I even more love this scene even more with Luthen. It just reminds me so much of Breaking Bad for some reason, with Walter White kind of just having a plan for like everything. If you guys have ever seen Breaking Bad, I love it. He just like step 2, always plan your escape, and he has the door rigged and bombed when there's officers outside of it, and he blows it up, and it's so cool. This shot right here as well, as I should mention as well, it's like lower to the ground, showing Luthen and Andor at this explosion site. It's so cool. I love everything about that. Also, the way that they did this like whole shootout action-packed scene right here as well looks absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't feel like too fast-paced or anything like that, or blurred. You're able to keep up with it, but at the same time it's keeping you on your toes, and it's fast-paced, and I love it. It's so cool. And at the same time, they're going back and forth between the other Imperial officers who are trying to track down where Luthen and Andor are, and all these other guards. It's here where we get even more out-of-pocket stuff from the Empire. It for one thing truly, I guess, symbolizes the evilness of the Empire, something that we already have kind of known, but like how dirty and gritty do they get? Like, are they just jerks for like no reason? Well, apparently so. Bix tries to make a run for it. I mean, previously before, like, why do you even have her like captive for another thing? Like, everybody around you is running around like crazy and banging on walls and all that type of stuff as well, so why single her out? She tries to make a run for it, and he like shoves her into like the corner. She hits her head and she starts bleeding pretty bad. It's just a dick move, dude. Like, the Empire's bad. And I should say that there is a difference between evil, which is something that you might more resonate with, I guess, stormtroopers, or maybe Darth Vader, Darth Sidious. Those are like evil kind of characters of the Empire. And then you have these dicks. You just have corpos. They're just dicks, honestly. From there, Andor and Luthen are able to make the run for it, and they start running towards the speeders, and like kind of they have to get into like the red zone, so to speak, here to get to the speeders. However, before that, we see Tim come running into town here, where Bix is kind of being held captive for like no apparent reason. Once again, he's totally like freaking out about it, the whole situation with her bleeding and everything like that, and these dudes are even bigger dicks about it. He lunges towards him, not even lunges towards him, he's like running towards Bix because, he's scared. He wants to comfort her, they care for each other type of thing, and they just shoot the dude on sight. I mean, whatever happened to stun type of thing? Like, you guys are just gonna straight up shoot him. What happened to stun? From there, we go to see Cyril. He's kind of going into a house to kind of camp out there, so to speak, keep eyes on everything. Well, at least he thinks. I just have to say, this is so peak right here. I love the way that they just did this. This dude's like sitting here looking around, chilling, having a great time kind of thing, and all of a sudden he hears a gun click behind him. He's like, oh shoot, I messed up. And it's not even just that. The cinematography, that's what it is. The cinematography just looks absolutely stunningly beautiful. This shot right here of Andor like zooming in on him, it just looks so cool. He's like interrogating him and everything like that. Like, how many people do you guys got with you? That whole thing. From there, the officer that shot Tim actually was sent back to the Republic ship. I'm not completely sure why. Maybe it was like some type of punishment or whatever. It seems as though, though, that some of the civilians or people that live there in this town and village, because everybody here is like against the Imperials and everything like that, it's kind of like sabotage the ship in a really strange way type of thing there as well, where they tied it to like some scrap metal and whatever. He flies up, he gets it tangled around like this big like ship, and like he gets pulled and dragged over onto the ship, and the ship like blows up, and it's just cool. And from there, we go back to Cyril, where he's like tied up and just like thrown into a corner. I'm kind of shocked that Andor and Luthen didn't just like get to kill the dude. Honestly, they should have almost, I would say, but he's gonna have like a whole redemption arc, something I'm speculating and theorizing on. I'll be talking about in a separate future video here on the channel. It's also here where Andor and Luthen make the grand escape. They get held on a couple of speeders here, and they send out this one speeder. Of course, everybody's thinking that they're in there. I believed it for a second, and then I realized like these guys are smarter than that, and that this isn't actually like the speeder that they're in. The speeder goes, they shoot it to death, and it like blows up, and then all of a sudden they come whipping out, and this other speeder away, and it's really cool. I like it. And then from there, it's also paralleling back to the flashbacks as well of how Andor is leaving the Imperial crash site there with his mother type of figure Marv, and kind of back and forth of how he's like leaving his homeworld planet to get away from the Empire. We also get another like shot of Marva, who's like crying over it. I mean, I feel kind of bad for her, but they're like mother and son type of figures, and she knows that he's like in some deep trouble here as well. It could get ugly, and it could get bad type of thing as well, which leads me to believe that like the rebellion origins go further back, especially with Marva as well, and that she's kind of like one of those key role players as well with the entirety of the rebellion. Bix gets rescued and untied by these two dudes, as I had mentioned earlier before. They're like really nice. I don't know their names or anything like that. I'm not completely sure. They're just like dudes. They're really nice. However, they're in a really big hurry to get out of there because they think that the Imperials are coming back through to cause more trouble, which could be highly likely. I'm curious to see that for episode 4. We just don't know completely. Also, the scene of like this big chum dude officer, the dude that was introduced before, is yelling at Syril. It's honestly kind of funny. Cyril's just in total utter shock about what just happened. Like, he got played, and he got played hard, and he's also coming to a realization of many different things. For one, what just happened with him, he got outsmarted, he got tied up and thrown into a corner. They made a grand escape and everything like that, and he's also kind of coming to some terms and realizations, I also believe, of the true motives of the Empire. Like, does anybody actually want to be there type of thing? Is anybody actually invested into the Empire as much as he may be? And then it is from here where the episode is kind of finishing off here. We get some really cool parallelism as it's going back and forth, just crossing back and forth of Andor leaving in the current time of when the show is taking place, and then where he's leaving his homeworld and the flashbacks with Marva, and they're kind of taking off. They're going into space and he's watching it all. It's so cool. And from there, there's where the episode ends. This here was an amazing 3-arc episode. I love the way that they did it and everything about that. I already mentioned like my one and only complaint about the entirety of episode for one thing, and the entirety of this overall show here as well. This was absolutely beautifully done. I love the story concept telling wise and everything that's been done, the way that they filmed it and made it, and the production, everything that went into this show here as well, with the practical sets and effects and props for this overall show as well, is very, very just genuinely awesome. I want all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. I'd actually love to hear what you guys all think. What do you guys think about Andor episodes 1, 2, and 3? I'd love to hear what you guys all think in the comment section down below. Some things that you might have noticed throughout these episodes, and what do you want to see for the future of this show? I'd love to hear what you guys all think in the comment section down below. Leave a like in the video if you did enjoy it, as it really helps the channel, and check out our Instagram and official Star Wars for more Star Wars content, link down in the description down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. As always, may the Force be with you. This has been Unofficial Star Wars. Have a great one, guys. Peace out.